Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Pam Rocker. My pronouns are she, her. I am really proud to be able to do queer interfaith and intersectional work with 2S LGBTQ people of faith of all kinds, and to be able to present this really special event alongside our colleagues at Affirm United Sacrament Ensemble. We are really proud to be supported by several organizations that cover way beyond Treaty 7 here in Alberta, but that is where we are physically based. And we acknowledge the lands that we inhabit, known as Mohkinstsis, also known as Calgary, and we honor and value the culture, the spirituality, the creativity, and the traditions of the First Peoples of Treaty 7, as well as the Métis Nation of Alberta, Calgary Elbow District. There are so many amazing things that happen on these lands. And so I'm so thankful for the stewards of the lands who have come before us. And we hope and pray to more each day be treaty people who live into reconciliation. Before we get going on this, our National Affirming Pi Day official pre-event to get you really excited about celebrating it in your communities, I wanted to just share an open word about something that I'm sure is on all of our hearts and minds, which is, the horrific violence and shooting that happened in Tumbler Ridge, a small town in British Columbia last week. On top of, I know all of us really reeling from something like this that, thank God is not something that happens all of the time here, and thinking about the families and all of those who are fearful in their own communities because of what happened. We also know that because the shooter has been identified as having a trans identity, lots of folks are using this really, really tragic moment to pile more hate on the trans community. I feel like, especially where we are in Alberta and with the bills that have been passed in the past couple of months, it kind of seems like, queer, trans, and gender diverse people, especially youth, are just kind of getting blow after blow. So we wanted to acknowledge that, and we wanted to state unequivocally that we support and affirm trans identities. We know that the identity of somebody who commits violence does not matter. It doesn't give us any credence to judge any people group at all. And we know that this is a strategy of folks who already want to cause harm. So in hoping to mitigate this and to give a couple of tools to our communities that we're in touch with, I'm going to put in the chat. We had a great event in December where we had a professional boundary coach come and talk to us about 10 practical things that you can say to defend trans folks. So the most prevalent myths and misinformation about trans people, and what are some things that you can say in response to shut that down, but to hopefully keep relationship if you want to with the person. And there's different tiers too of what you can say depending how comfortable you are in the situation. So we have a video of that that is available. So if these are conversations that ever come across your path, or they might one day, this is really, really good practical information to have, and just a good way of thinking about how we can stand up and stand with others in a good way, in a responsible, healthy, heart-filled way, in solidarity. So thanks for giving us a moment to share about that, as it's incredibly important. And I'm going to hand over the next piece of our event to actually start diving in to Executive Director of Affirm United and my friend, Ruth Noble.
Thanks, Pam. I am Ruth Noble. My pronouns are she, they. I'm from United Sacrament Ensemble, and I'm really excited to be part of this evening, this panel, and to be part of Pi Day. Pi Day is so important, and it informs everything that we do at Affirm United. Being public and intentional and explicit is how we live out our faith every day as affirming ministries. And we have created a Lenten resource. Today is Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of Lent. And I see some people have glitter on their foreheads. So I have a little bit of glitter on my forehead, more on my hands because I did Ash Wednesday earlier today. And so I'm just going to read from this resource. It's called From Ashes to Fire: The Roads of Witness, Reckoning, and Renewal. And it's Lenten liturgies that Reverend Karen Lowe, who's a retired United Church minister, created, that are based on the history and the apology that was given this past summer at the General Council around the 1988 decision and to the 2S LGBTQIA plus communities in the United Church of Canada. So I was just going to read a little bit from the call to gather. When dust speaks truth. Come, beloved of God, come as you are, dust and breath, scar and song. You are who have walked through the valley of denial and called it faith. You have borne the church's silence as a second skin. Come with the ashes of memory upon your brow, the grief of friends buried too soon, and the courage it took to keep loving anyway. And that's what it means to be public and intentional as explicit in faces of adversity and despair and fear. We still go forward and we still declare love for one another, and we still declare that we are safe with one another and we are a community that loves one another. So I'm going to turn it back to Pam.
Thanks so much, Ruth. Such a good reminder and how that connects with lots of things that we're experiencing on this day. I have the pleasure of introducing one of the best humans I know, and somebody who, if you don't know, you'll be glad you know, which is Reverend Keith Murray. A little bit about Keith. Keith was raised in the Pentecostal community and spent 2 decades exploring spirituality through yoga, Buddhist meditation, and indigenous ceremonies before joining the United Church in 2018. Keith is a big Tolkien nerd. I can't even tell you how big. Oh my gosh. Loves astrology, tarot, and is always exploring different creative outlets, including learning the art and science of perfumery. And we're going to start with having Keith tell us a little bit about themselves. So over to you.
Well, thank you, Pam. Thanks everyone for having me and for being here tonight. Yeah, so you can just call me Keith. In English, my Dharma Buddhist name in Tibetan is Konchak Dawa Gaelic. It means goodness and virtue of the triple gem moon, but Keith is good. And I'm here in Treaty 7 in Calgary, Mohkinstsis. Welcome. I'm going to share screen. I'm going to just take us back in time, give you a little bit of context for like my journey as a creative person and a spiritual person. And I think looking back, I've been very public and intentional and quite often explicit in my artwork. So we'll try and keep it relatively PG. But here we go. So I'm going to start with this image. I just found this as a drawing I did back when I was 17. So this would have been the year 2000. And I think I was beginning to find a sense of self and my spirituality. But prior to that, high school was a little rough. And I'm going to show you a drawing. This is a self-portrait. You can see my technique evolved a little bit by the time I got to art school. But growing up in Alberta in the 90s as a intersex, non-binary, queer person wasn't that great of a time. This is a installation I did. It was a performance that I had done where I was trying to explore this sort of role of religion as mediator, and really exploring connection to body and spirit. And so I called this transliminal baptismal, where I try to prostate my body by licking the like liminal meniscus where the water met the edge of the tub basin. I couldn't make it all the way around, but yeah, it was a good effort of trying to contort my body to find this place in between where heaven and earth sort of met, and water is this sort of sacred ritual. So this is the baptism into some of the performance art pieces that I began doing. This I think was 2005. Well, I was skinny. Goodness. I keep saying that we need to make a ritual for the transition from twinkhood to bearhood. Anyhow, this is a installation I did in 2003 where I took 6 of the most iconographic moments of the life of Christ, and I made, like, I mean, this was before flat screen TVs. I made video sort of vignettes, and I'll just let them sort of play quickly here. That sort of you'll recognize some of them. So the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, I was sort of interested in this idea of transmission of HIV virus. And so, had a character playing the role of Gabriel. And then the next image is the Madonna and Child, sort of exploring this idea of where could we find Christ in any day experiences. So the single mother, the baptism of Christ. So what it would be to invite an unhoused person to use your shower. Then what's the next one? Oh yes, the Last Supper. Bunch of us art students and credos at a cocktail night in Calgary. This was the Pieta. Yeah, two sex workers sort of supporting each other after a difficult evening, and the resurrection. Could we see Christ equally in bodies that are not often valued in dominant oppressive systems? This is some stills from a series piece I did called Lady in the Tramp. So drag, it takes place in the Fruit Loop in Calgary, the gay prostitution district back in the day, which is also where the Lougheed House is. So I had this idea. I wanted to imagine like queer history by sort of creating it. So what would, because we've been here all along, but there's rarely do you find documentation. You kind of have to look for it. So I wanted to illustrate a queer experience in the old-timey part of Calgary. This is a still from a piece I called DIY, Do It Yourself. That's both me. And you can probably guess what's going on there. But, this was, if I was to say the first date, and then led to this. This is the first time I think I got misgendered in the thing. But to be fair, it was 2008 and they, them was not quite the refs. But yeah, so this actually led to me getting married. I married myself in 2008. This was during the height of the queer liberation movement being sort of centered around equal marriage and don't ask, don't tell. And I kept being like, well, why? As a queer person, maybe we're on the outside. We have an opportunity to look at these systems. Do we want to participate in this institution of marriage that fails 70% of the time? And is came from women being property of men. Do we want to participate in more? So I've vowed to love myself. And this is when I took the Bodhisattva vows. I had an Elvis impersonator do the wedding, and I integrated my masculine and feminine selves. This is a character, Baroness von Beaverhausen. We hosted croquet tournaments. Jamie Tognazzini has been a longtime collaborator. You'll see them and stuff. This is another drag character, Mrs. Mystery. They're the 14th incarnation of Carol Channing from the year 2525, coming back from the future to let the children know it will be okay. This was at a beloved performance artist, queer performance artist in Calgary, was killed cycling in New York City. Her name Jasmine Valentina Heron, and we painted a ghost bike for her and changed it to the site. But then my friend Anthony and I, we had a dream that we had become resurrected in sort of these twin drag queens where we took the ashes and they turned into glitter. And so we made these contraptions where we biked through Central Park in New York City, splitting glitter from these contraptions that came out of our rear ends as we biked through the city. Here's a image of the installation at the Illingworth Kerr in Calgary. This is from my glow-in-the-dark era. One of the things I found, when I left the church early on was the rave scene became my own sort of sanctuary. And so I did this installation where I'd collected thousands of glow-in-the-dark icons. You can see, there's Obi-Wan Kenobi, Hanuman, Shiva, Our Lady of Fatima in there. And I wanted to sort of create like a sacred mandala that represented, how the interconnectedness of spirit and sacred and the profane. It was called The Neon God We Made, if you are Simon and Garfunkel fans. Then this is a piece called The Dolly Shot, where I painted myself like a color negative and lip-synced I Will Always Love You as sort of a prayer to myself, my own healing journey and integration journey. There's another image from the thing. So one of the things that happened growing up, I was assigned being male at birth and the gender of being a boy. But when I went through puberty, I started growing breasts and I blocked this out of my consciousness. But for a year, I had duct taped my chest and had a secret mastectomy when I was 14. And so 11 years later in therapy, this all came back to the surface. And so this piece was sort of a way of me reintegrating that part of myself that I had lost without feeling I had any choice in the 90s. This is an installation called While You Were that happened during the Fairy Tales Film Festival that I used to be a part of, gosh, many years ago. And it was a community piece where with, I don't know how many people, dozens of us, we inflated hundreds and hundreds of glow-in-the-dark condoms and put with helium and put little UV LEDs in them. And there was over 900 to represent how many people would have contracted HIV over the course of a movie, a 90-minute film. And so you walk through, it had this very elegiac quality, this, but also this amoebus, I don't know, undersea vibe to it. Here's another image. I really loved working in community. This was a piece I did in Vancouver with, I collaborated a lot with The Only Animal called Out on a Limb, where for 6 months we worked with members of the downtown east side, drug users, people who experience mental illness and housing insecurity, and helped them translate their stories that we projected on trees 100 feet tall in the park. Another project I did with The Only Animal was with Transcare BC, where we created understanding that so many trans children, their experiences can be so medicalized. We wanted to create an art experience where they could create a room for themselves, where we had a smorgasbord of all the art supplies you could imagine, and wanted to give young people an opportunity to create a safe space to talk about boundaries and what would be in it. It was a really amazing experience. Other ways of activating community. So when Greta Thunberg was coming to Vancouver during the climate protests back in 2000, I can't remember when that was. But the sustainability teams, we had found out from the David Suzuki Association that they were going to announce a lawsuit to the federal government for failing to protect the future environment. So we worked with them and we came up with this idea of creating like these emojis that then, you know, what could be a really heavy public conversation could transform the space. So the one side of it was a heart. And then when you flipped it, it was a green dot, which was a symbol of sustainability, but also made it to look like an eye. So it's like, you know, we've got our eye on you. So here you can see them at Vancouver Art Gallery where the protest was held. And here's a little clip of them in action. I want to show this one too, although it's not my work, but this was a big collaborative effort with so many people. And I just, you know, the way art can activate and transform space, an artist at Hillhurst made all these rainbow scarves when we showed up at City Hall in support of conversion therapy bylaws. And so I remember the mayor saying, well, we know what you're here for because you're all wearing a uniform. And so, you know, simple ways that art can sort of activate spaces. There's a more recent piece where I, during the pandemic, had sort of seen this ideological split. Part of my family went full freedom convoy. And then, you know, I've been participating in pride parades. So I had this idea of what if, you know, as things kept getting so polarized, we could strip these things from their meaning. And so I took the neutral gray color and made neutral flags and removed all the symbolism. And I wanted to create like a parade vehicle that could equally belong in a freedom convoy or a pride parade. And then we played these characters. I think we just see a clip. Yeah, so here we are in the neutral zone. Come join us if you want or not. We're here in this parking lot. We've got merchandise. You can represent nothing. No, make sure to say nothing. Wouldn't you say? Or maybe not. You know? This is also a highlight. After 2 years of work with the Chinook Winds region, we were able to celebrate the region becoming affirming. And this was, of course, when drag queens were the target of, you know, the right sort of scapegoating and around reading to children. And we were trying to find a Southern Alberta drag performer. We couldn't find one who was available. So I'm like, am I going to have to go to my parents' basement and dust off the bins? It seemed maybe it was godsend that the only one that fit was my Mother of God habit. So she descended from the heavens and read to the children. And then I'll just share actually, you know what? Let's stop there for that. It's probably more than enough from that. So just a little sample of some of their projects, but I'll give another person a chance. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. And I know that's just like a little bit of the work that you've been involved in. So I'm excited to hear more. Now I'm gonna give it over to Communications Director of Affirm United, who's going to introduce our amazing next artist, Jessie Pruden.
Hi, everyone. I have the honor of introducing Jessie Pruden, also known as Beat and Butter on Instagram. But here is some of Jessie's work, my lovely strawberry earrings. Jessie is a Métis beater from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Her fun and colorful designs are inspired by her friends, family, nature, and her culture. She identifies as a queer, disabled Métis woman and finds lots of color and light in those communities that she channels into her contemporary designs. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jessie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessie. My family comes from the Stony Point region in Manitoba, but I grew up in Winnipeg with my closest family. I started beading back in 2020 during the pandemic. I had become disabled pretty recently before that. Before that, I was working about 25 years in restaurants. So I thought that was going to be my career, but then wasn't. So during the pandemic, I was actually in school, for women and gender studies and Indigenous studies. But when the pandemic happened, it was really, really hard to concentrate on schoolwork, and I was really missing my family. And I decided that was the time to like start learning a new skill. And my auntie Doodley she's amazing. I look up to her so much, and she's been a beater my entire life. She had always made us moccasins and mucklucks and stuff when we were growing up. And so I really wanted to kind of like feel connected to her. So I taught myself how to bead through YouTube videos, which I do not recommend to anybody ever. It's really difficult. There's nobody there to tell you what you're messing up. And it took a while, but I got the hang of it. And then I taught my brother, and the two of us just started beading in my parents' basement during the pandemic. And I started posting my stuff to social media, and then my Instagram got pretty popular, which is awesome. And the next year, I got invited to go to Paris Fashion Week, which was pretty crazy. I got to go with my friends and my family. There was 5 of us in total, and we all just happened to be able to go, which was awesome. And I had my stuff walk the runway, and my brother and I got to walk the runway afterwards. So it was really cool being like a fat, disabled, queer Métis person on a Paris runway. That was awesome. After that, I've gotten like a lot of really cool opportunities. I've had my stuff featured in television shows and red carpets and runways and stuff. But most importantly, my stuff is really represented in my own communities. I get to see my stuff all over the place, which is really cool. I've had customers tell me that they've run into my work in Italy, which was like so cool to hear. And I've gotten to travel around the world with it. Most notably for me, one of my favorites was I got to go to Nook in Greenland a couple of years ago for their culture festival and do an artist talk there. And it was just so cool to be connected with these other Indigenous people whose culture I would have never otherwise seen, and see their beadwork and get to connect with that. Beadwork has really given me a life after I thought my life was basically over, because when you're unable to walk properly, it's really difficult to work. But beadwork gave me so many incredible opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. I've gotten to go to so many places I wouldn't have gone otherwise, meet tons of people, and really be able to do stuff and give back to my communities. I get to do a lot of fundraising through my beadwork, and I just love that. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great. And last but definitely not least, we're going to hear a little bit about our third guest from your friend and mine, program coordinator for Affirming Connections, Miranda.
Thanks, Pam. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Kate Hatch. Kate is a polymath, a writer, artist, podcast producer, philosopher. I love it when people describe themselves as philosophers, and it's absolutely accurate, I can confirm. And designer, and has been a Dharma practitioner since 2008. A trained Buddhist chaplain, Kate provides chaplaincy support in the realm of social change, particularly around anti-racism and disability justice. And I happen to know that Kate is also a producer of beautiful artwork, which I'm so excited for you to get to see in just a moment. Kate, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for that lovely interaction. I feel like I have so many different bios out there. I never know which one I'm going to get. Also, it's just been really lovely. Keith, I was at your wedding and it was so great seeing that photo. I was like, oh, look at that. That was amazing. I also married myself, inspired by Keith. So I am born and raised Hungarian. And my parents are very creative people. My dad has a wood shop in his basement. I grew up in a house that still has, my parents still live there. It has a kiln. So my mom did ceramics and clay, and my mom also did quilting and scrapbooking. It's funny because my mom liked to say that she's not artistic. I point out that all of those are arts. So I was very fortunate because I grew up in a household where I was very much encouraged to be creative, and that's how I have come to now identify as a multi-genre writer and a mixed media artist. It was a real revelation for me to start to do mixed media for my art. It really changed it and kind of leveled it up. So the predominant reason that I was invited to be here is because one of my major pieces that I'm working on, bodies of work that I'm working on, is called Sacred Love, Sacred Lives. And they're a series of embroidery pieces that I started to create basically as a way to be present with the grief that I've been feeling as the 2S LGBTQ community, and especially Two Spirit and trans people and intersex people, are really coming under fire from bigotry. So I wanted to make sure that I was finding a way to be present with the joy that I find in this community. Being queer is like one of the best things ever, and I love it so much. And I love my community so much. And so I started these pieces basically as a way to show the value that I get from this community, and also from being disabled. So disability is something that I became aware of in my life later on. And the messaging out there basically is that if you're disabled, you are a burden, you don't really have anything to offer, or there's the idea that like disabled people can work sometimes. And I don't think that your value should be tied to whether or not you can be productive under capitalism. Your value exists just because you exist. And so, yeah, queerness and disability have actually been two of the most enriching identities that I've been able to connect with for community, the belonging that I find in them. So that is the current body of work that I'm doing. I'm also a tanka artist, which is a traditional practice that comes out of Buddhism. It originated in India and was adopted pretty much by every culture that has adopted Buddhism as it's moved around. I am a Buddhist in the Kagyu and Nyingma lineages out of Tibetan Buddhism. And so most of my tanka work has been informed by studying Tibetan tankas, but I always try to do my best to honor the incredible lineage around the world of tanka art. I'm completely self-taught in my tanka art, and I did not actually send in any pictures of it, which was silly of me. I just didn't think about that. I was like, crafting, embroidery, that's more on the crafting side of things. But my tanka work is also something that's very very mixed media. So the embroidery pieces, I will often integrate, like I'll use acrylic paint for aspects of them, or fabric markers. With my tankas, I use a mix of pencil crayon and ink, watercolor, acrylic. I can't even remember everything. I use any material I feel like, and it's great. I can probably angle my computer slightly so you can see, and this is a very exciting moment for all of you. I started this tanka last year, and I just sketched it last year. And I've decided this year is the year I'm actually going to focus on it. So that is what is down here in my very small home studio. You can sort of see it's a bit blurry, but this is my current tanka to give you a sense of the scale I like to work at. It's very mysterious right now, which is often the case with tankas, as they are a very deep spiritual practice to work on. So I do that. And then with my tanka artwork, because the nature of them as being very spiritual pieces of work, whenever I get commissions for tankas, I use all of the funds from that to do lots of collaborations with people. And so I collaborate most predominantly right now on making a zine that's called From the Quilt Bag. I have so far produced 9 issues of it, and this is an opportunity for me to use my print design skills that I really love, and to publish the art and writing of other 2S LGBTQ folks, and just celebrate community and celebrate our stories and voices and the ways that we do create, and that we have always been here and we will always be here. And yeah, I think that's all I have to share for now.
Thanks so much, Kate. I put Kate's website in the chat that you can just maybe open up the link and look at a little bit later. You can see, I believe Kate's done over 55 of those embroidery pieces and counting, and lots of other amazing projects and stuff. So you can learn more about Kate, but you're also going to learn more about Kate right now. So I'm going to just pose a question to all of our panelists. So what we wanted to know from you, as we're kind of talking about these intersections of like identity, artistic practice, what all of you have shared have so much more, your art has so much more to do with like all these different parts of who you are than just like, I make X thing, right? So I'm curious for all of you, how does your artistic practice connect with your spiritual practice? And yeah, whatever you want to share about that, because for a lot of us, those things do go together. So yeah, over to you, Kate, if you're ready.
Yeah. So, so many ways, like every way. um, the Sacred Love, Sacred Lives piece, I was interviewed for the Calgary Arts Development Living a Creative Life series, and they titled it "Every Stitch is Sacred," and I was like, "Oh, good," but really, like, absolutely caught it. That's the thing. It's a very contemplative thing that I do, as is Tonka work. I like to tell people that I always loved to make art, but I was always impatient for it to be done. And so I would simplify my art just to make it so I could kind of get it through. And as soon as I began to work on Tonka artwork, which was sometime around, I'm gonna say 2012, I started to understand how important it is to be really present with it. So it became a amazing practice of presence and patience. And for me to cultivate patience, for anyone who's known me, is incredible. And it worked. So yeah, it's a very grounding thing. And then it feeds into, so Keith talked about doing the Bodhisattva vow. The Bodhisattva vow in Buddhism it's an impossible vow, and I love it. I love it for that. It's the best thing about it. So the Bodhisattva vow is like a vow to free all beings from the suffering of this life. I vow to be of service to all beings, no matter what, for endless lifetimes until all beings are free. And because it's so, a lot of it becomes, okay, how can I just help this being that I live with? How can I help this being in my community? How can I help my friend who just got their top surgery and needs a T-shot and can't give it to himself? So I can do that kind of thing. Or just making meals and taking them to a friend who's going through cancer treatment, or gathering with friends at someone else's house where they host a meal every week, and just being present with each other in a way that is joyful and restorative. The opportunities that I create for people to be able to collaborate on things, because I am in a place where I'm fortunate enough that I get to do this mostly full time, and that's really amazing. And so it feels like it's also generosity practice for me with all of my art. How can I make sure that anything that comes to me through what I create, I can give out so that other people can also create? So, for example, I have right here, this was a collaboration I did with someone. So this was from a tanka that I drew of the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, and this was one of the sacred items that Avalokiteshvara was holding. The Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who is the representation of all of the compassion of all of the Buddhas. And I reached out to a friend. I've met someone through someone who's an incredible bead artist. Now, Jesse, I'm like, maybe we should do a collaboration. And I said to them, I was like, it was Holly Angel is their name, and I said, I would love for this image I drew to be a pin. Could you make it? And she did, and she did such an incredible job. I was stunned. I knew it would be amazing, but it was just even more amazing than I could have imagined. So it was great because it was like an opportunity. I got to use some of the payment I got from my commission to pay her to make something, and she really enjoyed making it. And now it's something else that I get to wear. So there's like this reciprocity and collaboration and generosity in all of the work that I do. And that to me is just very deeply spiritual work.
Amazing. Thank you. Over to you, Jessie.
When it comes to beadwork is slow and it's intentional, a lot like what Kate was just describing with their work. With beadwork, you're working with these tiny, tiny little beads. You're working with the thinnest needle in the world. You're working with a thread that is actually trying to work against you. So it is a huge practice in just stillness and intentionality and just like connecting with yourself. I make a lot of fringe earrings, and all of my fringe earrings, my different styles are named after friends and family who have inspired the style that I make. So when I am beading for that friend. I am beading for that family member. When I'm making a piece, I get to put all of my good energy into there because I'm thinking of the ways that I love the person that inspired that. And that makes my pieces special. And I hear it all the time that people can feel my energy through my pieces, which is like an incredible thing to hear from people. And this a lot of the ways that I work on things and the way I can feel my mind working on beadwork and perfecting it and coming up with designs, I know that stuff is from my ancestors. I know that stuff is coming to me from my aunties. I have 7 aunties on my dad's side. Half of them have passed away now. So like they were all creative people and I can just feel their energy in me when I am creating. And I'm like continuing on these art practices that my family had within us. And that is just like so beautiful and so cool to be able to do. And I mentioned my Auntie Doodley, who's an amazing beadwork artist. She's in her late 80s now, and she still beads every day in front of her little TV on the reservation. She's so cute. And just to be able to show her my beadwork and for her to like see her influence in there and know that that blood knowledge is in me, it's just I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's just cool knowing that like I'm doing my ancestors right. And I love to teach beadwork as well. So I'm keeping this tradition on, making sure that this tradition doesn't die, that people have knowledge of this, that people have knowledge of our stories. Because when I'm teaching beadwork, I can talk about our stories. When I went to Greenland, a part of my artist talk was talking about creation stories. They didn't know Métis lore or stories or anything like that. So it was really cool because my dad is also an Indigenous educator. He is a consultant for all kinds of Indigenous programs, education programs. And it was really cool to kind of collaborate with him and think of like the stories that we can introduce ourselves with in Greenland where they don't know any of those stories. So yeah, that all that stuff just like not only feels like you're speaking with your ancestors, but also like just fuels you, right? Like it just makes you feel whole. And I'm so lucky that I'm able to do this full time. And I think because I make it so personal, each of my pieces, that it doesn't feel like a job. Whereas I feel like a lot of creatives start creating for a job and they're like, oh, this sucks. Now I have to do this. But at least for me, like I'm making these pieces and I'm thinking about those friends and family all the time. And it just like fills my cup. That's all.
That is beyond articulate and amazing, Jessie. So thank you so much for that. What a beautiful way to honor those who've gone before us and who are still speaking to us today. Yeah, that's really fantastic. Okay, Keith, over to you.
Well, it's funny. I just here I'm just going to share just a one quick slide. This is a quote from Julia Cameron. So one of the ways that I've been very literally living into this is I realized, well, I'm saying like maybe being a minister is my next like biggest long form performance art piece, but also, I'm called to this work and to community. And I've been really needing a practice to like help me find my focus again from like the noise of distraction and, feeding these glowing rectangles, my soul. And so to wrangle that back, I invited the community to do a 12-week artist way where we get up every morning early and write 3 pages and we walk together. We have a check-in every week. And yeah, there was overwhelming response. 44 people signed up for the info session. And in the end, our cohort's around 25 people. And we meet every week and we're in the middle of it, halfway through right now. But so, being with others as we're like going through the discipline of showing up for ourselves and for our creativity, it's like so good when we can just do it together and be supportive and be like, yeah, this is hard, this sucks, but then also get to see the discoveries along the way and share them with each other. It's really cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. The next question that we have is the most kind of connected to, I guess, overtly to the conversation that we're having tonight. So, National Affirming Pi Day is coming up on March 14th, 3.14. Get it? Pi. And we should all know by now, and the audience anyway, that stands for public, intentional, explicit. And it's our way of putting kind of flesh and bones onto us saying, I'm an affirming person. We're an affirming community of faith. What do we actually do under those categories, publicly, intentionally, and explicitly, to show that we are an ally, to show that we are in solidarity, to show celebration, support, and learning from? We have lots of folks here who are from communities who are going to be hopefully celebrating Pi Day in some way, and just being an affirming community year round. So I'm curious, and maybe we'll kind of go backwards again, Keith. So I'm going to come back to you. And just, what are some ways that faith communities can engage with the arts, could partner with their local arts community, could, kind of maybe think outside the box in terms of what they do to connect with this idea of Pi. So from your creative mind, what are some ideas that you might have for those folks?
Sure. Well, so I'll just share a story. One of the things we did last year, so Knox, our affirming team was like, we need some sort of affirming mural. Like, we have this fortress-like building downtown that is really scary, and to many people represents an institution of harm and control. And how do we live into and like see people what happens on the inside of this like imposing fortress, right? And we often get so many questions about, why have a pride flag in the sanctuary or outside? And what does it mean? And the new colors. And so I pitched this idea at council. I'm like, I want to cover the exterior building with 100,000 giant sequins. And I was fully like, it's not going to go. And it was like a unanimous vote. And so we put in a grant for Calgary Arts Development for a community public art grant. And we got it and we did it. And part of the motivation was, general counsel was coming and going to do an apology. So we wanted something that could like hold space for that. And so we created the Knox glitter rainbow. I'm going to share a bit so you can see sort of the story. But first I'm going to just share this. This is sort of the didactic that lives outside of it. I'm going to try and make posters of because probably this graphic down here, that's like the history of images and like color and like LGBTQ organizing, took me like the longest amount of time to do, and I think people might really enjoy it. So it shows like the years in history of like where some of these different movements like came from and how the colors were used. Like the earliest color, violets, 600 BCE, Sappho of Lesbos, and we see violet continues to be a very prominent color in community organizing. So anyhow, this lives outside as part of it, and it's got the history of LGBTQ inclusion, the United Church of Canada. We had these sequins manufactured. We turned one of the rooms inside into basically like an assembly production line, and had a whole gaggle of queerdos and community members start assembling. So they came in like basically 12-inch by 12-inch sections with 30 sequins on each one. And then we sort of made a system where we assembled them in strips, sent them out the window, and then started loading them up. You can see me here. I was literally like doing weddings and then changing into my like safety harness and became Reverend Scissor Lift operator. But it was a whole community involvement. Like people all ages got an opportunity to participate. And yeah, you can see us here drilling into the concrete, fixing them to the wall. And I just wanted to share this. So on the day that we were inaugurating it, a rainbow came out on my way in, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty special. It's a sign. But yeah, here we are cutting the rainbow ribbon. Spot Pam, here we are again. And I'll just, so you can see it in all of its glory, shimmering now in the wind. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It turned out better than I thought it could, and that it's a symbol of the community. And each color, is holographic. So we wanted them to reflect, all of the colors within and show how we're all interconnected and we all need each other, have shared mission and solidarity. The trans colors too, the blue reflects pink and the pink reflects blue. And of course the white then has all the colors. But yeah, so that's one way. Get a grant, collaborate with an artist, transform your building.
Legit. And I mean, that is just an example of you might have a wild idea. Somebody in your community might have a wild idea and think, what if we could do XYZ? You never know. There might be a partnership out there, or some artist out there, a grant out there somewhere that you can access that will allow you to do something really big and wonderful with your communities. Next, I want to hear the same question about how we could be pi from Jesse.
Excuse me. So I was thinking about this question kind of like in terms of the crafting community that I'm very much a part of. And that is like the Indigenous, queer, mostly beadwork community. I have friends who make clothes and ceramics and all that kind of stuff. Um, and just thinking like more kind of like practically about how people can support artists like that. And like the number one way is obviously buying from small businesses. I know a lot of my art friends are having a really hard time right now. It's tough. Everything is so expensive. And for people who are trying to do art full time, it's really difficult to maintain like a regular income. I do this full time and my year is like up and down like crazy. Like, some months I think that, a collection that I have is going to sell out, but it doesn't because people would rather go to Amazon and get their earrings like in a day, which whatever. Or they want to go to Temu, who's stealing people's art and pay way less for their beadwork and all this stolen stuff. So buying small, buying local is really, really huge. Going to markets and stuff is really, really huge because when a market, even if you don't buy anything, when you go to a local artisan market, going there and just showing support, the people who are running that market can see how many people are there. And when there's more people coming and looking around and walking around, it's easier for them to obtain grants to continue doing markets, which gives us an opportunity to sell stuff. There's also like really small ways of engaging and supporting artists, and that is through social media. I know the majority of my sales are online sales, and the way that those are successful is if people see that I'm having a sale at all. And the algorithm on lots of social media favor people who are paying for it, people who are paying for their profiles, bigger companies who have a lot of money. That's what social media wants to see and what it's pushing towards us. So us smaller makers get put on the back burner, especially if we don't want to pay $50 to have one of our posts like show up on your feed all the time. And that's expensive. And a lot of people can't afford that. So just going to your small maker's profile and liking stuff, commenting on stuff, saving stuff, sharing stuff onto your profile. I know I've gotten so many opportunities of mine through people sharing on their profiles. That's how I ended up being like having jewelry on TV, was that a person shared some of my stuff and their friend happened to be the costume person for a TV show, and then they bought off of me, which was incredible. So small stuff like that is free and it's easy, super easy. Even if you think you have a tiny platform, any person of yours who might see it might be like, hey, I really like that. I want to go buy that. And that helps me get groceries the next week. So yeah, I think just engagement is like the number one thing, right? And that includes like going to art shows or whatever, just being there and being present. So people see that you're there. That is so important.
Thanks so much, Jesse. What a simple reminder of something that's easy to do that we, so many of those things that we can do with whatever funds we have or not. And yeah, just easy ways that we can show our support and support really good, amazing art getting out there. Same question over to you, Kate.
Um, I think what Keith and Jesse said really basically covered it as far as I'm concerned. I just really want to emphasize the word of mouth and the community side of things. That it may seem like social media is like, I mean, social media generally isn't great and is like really does put us at a distance from each other. But also, if you take the time to send someone's profile and say, hey, this artist is like the person that I collaborated with for that for this pin. Also for the Sacred Love, Sacred Lives pieces, those collaborations are almost all people I met through social media where I followed their art and I thought it was great. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, I really like your art. Can we maybe collaborate and do a piece together? So that really building those very personal relationships and knowing that most of the things on the internet are designed for us not to do that. Holding it in your mind intentionally that it's very important for us to talk to each other and talk about each other. Like we should talk about people that we think are great who are making really cool art and share that. And you never know where it's going to go.
Thank you so much, Kate. We have this might be, oh wait. Yes, I'm going to come to you next, Keith. Our next question really has to, do with some of the same intersections, but I know I've seen a lot, especially with protest and things kind of, that can get violent. We've also seen a lot of creativity and a lot of ways that people push back, beyond holding a sign. And that is important, but there are other ways that we can do that as well. So my next question for all of you, and we'll start with you first, Keith, is when have you seen artistic practices or art as activism really work? And this could be something that you've been involved in or something that you've, been able to witness. But what are, some times where you've seen those intersections just work really well together?
I mean, so many ways. I think like art, often like activism or like, the site of the protest can be so charged, right? You have one side of the street that's like protests and then counter protests, and then there's like no opportunity for nuance. But I've also seen like times where artists have made, giant angel wings to obscure at pride parades the like homophobic signs that are put up, but also like I think comedy and creativity can help us get at these like hard and really charged things from the edges. Sometimes a work of art can make us like see things in a different light that can be disarming, right? Because when we reduce things to a slogan or it's very black and white, but the reality is that like I think the artists are the best at that. So that's the thing that I'm always trying to explore in my work is like how can we get at this from the edges in a way that disarms. And I think that's always helpful is to invite artists to those conversations because, there's always another way of looking at things.
Thanks so much, Keith. And I know Jesse's having a little issue with her internet, so I'm just going to go to you next, Kate, with the same question.
Yeah, I love this question. This is such a fun question. The first thing that comes to mind for me is Sins Invalid or Sins Invalid. Who knows how you pronounce it? They are a performance art group that is made up of disabled folks, primarily BIPOC disabled folks. And they basically came up with, I believe, the principles of disability justice. So they're like a very prominent for me influence of how artists and artistic community can radically change the world. The disability justice movement is incredible. And the connections and things I've learned from people who've been connected to the Sins Invalid group is just it's that lineage thing we were talking about, like who you learn craft from. I'm not a performance artist, and yet I'm so influenced by this relatively small performance artist community because of the ripple effects of the work that they were doing in their community and how that impacted other people and how more disabled people took that out into their communities, and it like reached me and it reaches a lot of people. It's quite a global movement at this point, which I think is great. And then on a really personal basis, I'm going to just check the year because who knows how many years have passed since 2020. In 2018, I put out a call to folks in my own little small community and asked them if they wanted to do a year-long practice with me, that I invited them to participate in whatever way felt good and comfortable. So I called it Love in Public, and the name of it was inspired by the Cornell West quote that justice is what love looks like in public. So the question that I asked everyone to carry and that I also carried for that year, and there were 10 of us total who did it, was what does love in public look like? And how do you see that and experience that? And then throughout the year, it was an opportunity for me. It was sort of like writing prompts every month that I got to do. But I also really was exploring it from the place of Green Tara practice. So Green Tara is a bodhisattva of compassion who is notably different than most tankas when they're seated in a lotus position. So she sits on a lotus, but one of her feet is extended. And that is because she is compassionate action. She's not just abiding in compassion. She is also going to serve and like step off the lotus, which is a very powerful image because usually that lotus is like you're there, you've arrived, you're on your enlightened throne. And so I felt like that was really what this practice was for a year. And I invited my community to participate in it. And people shared all of their different thoughts and ideas and reflections. And so I ended up compiling it into a zine, which is actually free, available on my website as a PDF that you can download and print, or you can just look at it as the digital version. And it's beautiful. Like people wrote really beautiful things. They took amazing pictures of different things. Someone just sent me a picture of a public toilet and you're like, this is love in public. There's a toilet available for people. That's something. And I know that it really changed everybody who was in that group because even to this day, people really talk about it. And when COVID arrived in our world, it was an interesting thing to reflect on how like wearing a mask is an act of love in public, a very simple act of love in public.
Thanks so much for that, both of you. We're probably going to do one more question, and I know I'm just have been emailing with Jessie here in the background. She's just having trouble still, but she's going to try to rejoin us for the rest of our time together. I just have one last question that wasn't on the questions that I asked you, but I know, I'm sorry about this, but I'm gonna pose one to Keith and one to Kate, and they're specialized for each of you. So Keith, I'm wondering, if I'm sitting here at this event or I'm watching the recording and I'm thinking, okay, so how does this actually translate to like, what we maybe do on a Sunday morning if we're of a Christian tradition and that's when we do our services, or what could we do? Who could we have come and speak at a Pi Day event, or come do the sermon instead of our minister? Or, what are ways in which our theme this year of crafting community could manifest in those spaces where maybe we kind of get into a routine and we don't necessarily think creatively about how we can, integrate something a little bit different into the stuff that we do. So what comes to your mind if people are sitting down to plan a Pi Day service or event, of ways to engage their congregation um, in meaningful ways that they may not be thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think talk to the artists in your community, find out who they are. Also, it's always great if you can put honorarium towards it. If you're ever thinking about working with artists, there's often like really quick turnaround civic grants that you can get for like small chunks of money, like $5,000. There's the CARFAC fee schedule. It's if you want to pay artists like professional fees, because artists often die from exposure. So I always recommend if you can pay your artists, great, do it. But yeah, like, there's so many ways. It could be working with, crafting community. We have a ministry that knits and crochets, and we provide those prayer shawls with blessings to people during times of difficulty. We've had rainbow ribbons come in that we then write prayers on and then tie to our building somehow. There's so many ways. Or even inviting a spoken word piece or a performance art piece. You don't always have to do a sermon on a Sunday morning. You can actually give that space to an artist to do a piece. And one of the ways you can find out about them, is hosting events in the evenings. And that's another thing that we've been trying to do, is have events where we collaborate with, the drag community and artists to give a platform. This idea of like, inviting artists to commission them to create works that are intentionally in conversation with the church, with the building, with what it represents, its history, and their identities. And out of that, it creates profoundly powerful ministry. And often those things can also be good things you can bring into a Sunday morning. Some conversations are well suited when it's nighttime, and some when it's well lit. So, you got to discern, but I'd say experiment and reach out and get some money.
Sweet. Thank you, Keith. I knew I could give that to you. So Kate, here's my question for you. So something that I'm actually seeing a lot online is, people wondering, with all the chaos and the hate and all of the things that are happening, we're exposed to really heavy, very real things that are happening to beloved people in our own communities and around the world. And sometimes it can feel like oh, I'm really going to sit down and knit right now, like, or I'm going to share something that I'm doing, or, is this frivolous? Is this, does this even matter? Right. Like, kind of feeling kind of frozen and like I need to do something really big or something really serious, right, quote unquote, to respond to what's happening in the world. So yeah, just as we get ready for a couple questions from folks who are attending, I wonder if you could just if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, I have so many thoughts on that. My first one is, and I can't take credit for this, I saw this as like a tweet back in the day when Twitter was still Twitter, which is anxiety isn't activism. So feeling terrible about things doesn't change those things and also doesn't make it possible for us to show up for them. So having an artistic practice, something that helps calm your nervous system, something that brings you joy or delight, something that helps you to be present with one thing for a time that doesn't split our attention, doesn't demand of us to take a particular action. That's all very, very good. Also, a very, very wise friend of mine, a Black woman that I knew and was in community with in Buddhist community in the United States, pointed out to me that the telling your story, this was specifically when I was struggling around writing, and basically had the same thought. It was in May of 2020, and George Floyd had just been murdered, and I thought, what is the point in me even writing something when police can just kill someone and publicly and have it filmed and nothing changes? And she said, your story matters, and historically, your story is one that people have not wanted to have told. So think about how you express yourself through your artwork and know that that matters, that creating as an act of resistance is very much a thing. And that feeling joy and finding community in that creating is also an act of resistance. It's saying, I will not be so worn down that you basically deplete me from being able to show up for myself. I think that's another really important thing we'll forget about is that when we are cultivating compassion, we need to include ourselves in that. And so if creating something brings you joy, then you should create to bring yourself joy. And if you can create in community and spread that joy, all the better. So it is not frivolous at all. It is absolutely necessary. Humans have been making art for as long as we have had signs that humans exist.
Wow,
Can
thank
I,
you so much.
can I just riff off of that brilliant thing Kate just said?
Yeah, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
one of the things I've been reflecting a lot on is this idea, and we have this line in the Christian tradition that we're made in the image of God, and what does that mean? And I think when we really sit with it, we're made in the image of the Creator. That means we're creators, and we're invited to participate in co-creation with all creatures, creator and creation. And I think the important thing to remember is that that doesn't mean that we're endlessly producing, the ongoing slog of capitalism. That is not it. Sometimes when you're creating, you have to have blank space on a canvas in order, and so sometimes creating means making space for others to create, to remove barriers, right? And so to be in collaboration with all creatures in creation is, I think, how we can live into being made in the image of the Creator.
Thank you so much, Keith. I can't keep up with typing my notes for everything that y'all are saying. I'm going to give it over to Ruth Noble, who we all know is Affirm United's executive director, just to moderate any questions that y'all might have for these amazing folks that we have.
Thank you so much, my friend. Yeah, if you have a question, please write it in the chat. I haven't seen any come up. It's just all been messages of appreciation and love for our amazing artists. I had a question, and it's, how would you inspire someone who feels that they want to create but is afraid to actually create? And Kate, if you want, you're smiling, so maybe if you want to respond to that first.
You can do things badly. And what's the worst that can happen? I tell people, I correct people regularly. I love every time someone tells me I'm talented, I said, no, I'm skilled. I've worked very hard at this. I've spent years working at it. I've tried a lot of different things. You know what I hate? I hate crochet. I tried it. I couldn't do it. It was the worst. And I just don't do it. And it's fine. Like I tried it I said no. I moved on to the next thing. Just create. Nothing bad can happen, honestly. The worst is that you'll find out that you didn't like a thing. Find out what's the least amount of money you can spend on something to try it out.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. Keith, do you have any advice?
Yeah, like this is such an important question. And this is what we're working through in the Artist Way. In Brene Brown's research, she discovered that 80% of people have what is called a creativity trauma wound. And I like experienced that firsthand. I witnessed it. Like I was, always like, I think because I didn't develop my motor skills, like, in track and field in elementary school, I was like way on outfield, like hiding over the hill. But like I spent all my time like drawing, right? And so, put in a lot of hours, but I would see my, people compare, the teacher would come around and be like, Keith, that's amazing. And then my friends like, how come I can't do that? And I could see the like heartbreak as they're comparing themselves to something I did. And, I think it's a really vulnerable thing to share something you've made to the world. Like honestly, I think this is the mystery of, the story of the Virgin Mary being asked, like, will you bring this thing into the world, this being into the world, knowing he will be tortured and killed? It often feels that way when you create something. You put it out to the world. It may be received with horrible criticism, feedback, but, sometimes you just have to do it because you have to do it. You have to say, yes, there's something in you that's like, yeah. And so I think, as you're experimenting, it's often not a good idea to show people your work, to let it be for you and just to keep trying. But, we often need that inner validation or outer validation. But so like, Artist Way Group is a great way to do that. Like, and that's what we've been practicing, not showing each other's work, but just walking with each other, encouraging each other, and then not judging each other. Because yeah, like Kate said, the first thing you're going to make is going to suck, and that is okay. You got to make a bunch of crappy things before you make something but there's room for it all. Like you wouldn't judge a kid who makes a beautiful drawing. You're going to frame it, put it on your on your fridge. So frame your own crappy art or your bad writing and put it on your fridge. It's okay. It's the first step.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
I also want to add to it that like, think about it like what you were saying earlier, Keith, about like the creator and being a creator. Like art doesn't belong to anyone.
Mhm.
It's there's no like there's lots of gatekeeping in it, and it's all BS. All of it. Like you can do whatever you want. You can create anything you want anytime. There's no rules. You don't have to go to school for it. Yeah, I'm completely 100% self-taught tanka artist, and I know for a fact that there are some people out there who will not like that. And I don't care. I'm gonna make tanka art anyway because I love doing it.
That's so good.
That's so amazing. Yeah. I mean, I keep thinking as you guys were talking, I kept thinking about the line from Rent, when Jonathan Larson's words are, the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation. And I thought about that in the struggle and the activism. And I wondered about your activism and your art. It seems to be so integral to who you are as artists and people. If you wanted to share a story or two, that would be wonderful. I just love listening to you guys talk. So I don't know who wants to go first. Keith, maybe do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm like trying to think. That's a good question. And it's like, I don't know if like my spirituality or my art or my activism has ever been separate. It's just something I've had to do and get out. And I don't know, maybe I was lucky that I felt so bold to do so. Like, but like I've tried to shove it down and it just makes me sick. And I mean, that's another thing Brene Brown talks about is that art creativity that's unused is actually not benign. It metastasizes as grief, as rage, as anger. And so this thing that we're naturally like meant to do, we're made in this image. And so when we're not participating in that flow of creation, what are we? We're consuming. We're stuck. And things that get stuck can, make us ill. And so I think it's you just have to be authentic and listen to what, spirit asking me to do. It might just be like, it might just be creating a really beautiful meal for yourself or like balancing a really nice budget. Like there's so many ways that creativity doesn't have to look like these big, grand, grandiose things, but it can be the simplest gestures. Like I think of, people in that moment in like Vietnam putting flowers in rifles, right? Like that's a creative act. And what a powerful image. Like it sticks with us, right? There's so many ways that when we just listen to spirit, it'll invite us to do things in a way that might not make sense, but might transform a situation that could be really charged into an opportunity for healing and connection.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Kate?
Yeah, it's really beautifully said. Yeah, I've often told people that if anyone tells me that I should make sure that I write because it obviously seems to help me. And I was like, well, telling me to write is like telling me to breathe. Like I can't not do it. It just like if I don't write, I will. That same thing, that feeling of kind of stuckness and yeah, like choking. Like it does feel it's a very visceral feeling if I don't express myself in different ways. And I think like so much of it for me too comes from a lot of my work. I'm working on this like land back, earth based sense, right? What does it mean to not be separate from nature, but actually be part of nature? We don't go out into nature, we are nature. But like here. And so what is natural, right? And it is really beautiful to me that some of the earliest things that we have from people in signs of humans is art. It's these amazing cave paintings and it's little pieces of jewelry and it's like you find like some little jug or something and it's got some little ornamentation on it. It's like that's not necessary. They didn't need to do that. Like they did that because like they found like animal prints in clay tiles, right? Like humans forever have just always been so human and it's just I think it's really important for people to understand that creativity is one of our most innate human characteristics. That's what I mean when I say like it doesn't belong to anybody. And so I think when you can tap into that, it's just absolutely vital. It's vital for your spirit and it's also really important to understand that like the way that capitalism views both spirituality and creation and art like artistic creation is it just like it really denigrates both, right? There's either there's no money in either. And then when we see someone who is, you know, successful, which is to say succeeding under capitalism within spirituality and within art, it's flattened. You can feel it, right? Like you can feel like the grifter, the spiritual grifter, and you can feel that mass manufactured art. That's why AI is so repulsive to me because it is stripping away something really core and essential to our humanity.
Oh my gosh. Kate, you said something so beautiful. And this is a really good offering for anyone who wants to go deeper on this topic. But Rainer Maria Rilke, a German poet from like the last century, has written some really beautiful poems. And I could make recommendations on which translations in English are my favorite. But Letters to a Young Poet, I would highly recommend for anyone who's wrestling with this idea of creativity. And one of the things that he says in it is that the only basis, like so often works of art, like we're trying to, and like I've seen works of art that's like, is this like, this is clearly for, a very commercial application. And maybe it's fine. There's room for all of it. But I love how he says about judging works of art. He said the only basis on which a work of art should ever be judged is if it's made out of necessity. That is, the artist had no choice but to bring it into the world to be of service to this thing. One of my friends calls it like these furious rabbits, this like thumping inside this thing that's gestating, like trying to get out. And when you're in service of that, you have no choice but to bring it into the world. And it may be a small thing and maybe, a big thing, and like, who knows? But I think you can see it in a kid's drawing to like a magnum opus of Mozart. Like when it felt like that had to be like this artist was listening to spirit and the discipline of like developing a skill and bringing it into the world. You can read it. You can feel it when you encounter that work. It came from somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like it's all the aspects of who we are as people. It's the aspects of our queerness and every aspect of our humanity comes out in creative ways. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much, both of you, for your heart, sharing your heart with us. It's just such an amazing gift. So Pi Day is coming up March 14th. So please help us to celebrate what you're going to be doing for Pi Day. Submit your events to the piday.ca website. We want to be able to have a full calendar so we can celebrate all the things that people are doing to be public and intentional and explicit. I know there's some amazing people that are doing some amazing events. I've heard it. I was talking to a church who's becoming affirming, and they were talking about their Pi Day event. They were hoping to have they're going to have their affirming celebration on their Pi Day as part of their Pi Day celebration. So I said, hey, put that in the calendar on the piday.ca. So share all the events, and thank you for sharing your public and intentional and explicit hearts with us, and for being here, and to Kate and to Keith and to Jesse for just sharing all of your art with us and your creativity. It's just been such a gift. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ruth. And yeah, please, we love to show what's happening across the country. And that's our most popular social media posts are sharing events that y'all put on, because you're getting peer energy to other people by showing the kind of stuff that you do. So please submit your event so that we can share it and you can inspire others as well. And yeah, we have so many new resources on our website, and lots of cool ideas are coming in from how people are, catalyzing this theme of crafting community. Let us know what you create. Send us photos. We'd love to share them. We know that all of us have some sort of art that we are passionate about, and I can only imagine how many artists are maybe like lurking in the background, and this is your time to shine. So yes, thanks to our lovely co-hosts Affirm United, Ruth, and to our speakers once again. Happy Pi Day, and we will hopefully see you soon.